Okay, we're on that public lane. Now we're down into a marshy area. Got this runway going back into this stand of tamaracks. Here we go, turns here. Sucks when you can't break a stick. Man, pretty good runway. Now this is the kind of stuff big bucks bed in. If there's a big buck on this property. Must be coming up into some high ground because I see a couple white oaks. Don't see any sign of any stands. This looks promising. This looks real promising. There's another runway coming into here. The cool thing about scouting this time of year, you can spook every deer out of this section and it's irrelevant. There are a few tracks back here, but not many because there's no reason for them to be back here right now. but there are a few. But the runways are pretty beat. You can tell they were used last deer season big time. And right here is a tiny little island with white oaks on it. All white oaks. Never been here before. Never set foot on this property. Wow. This looks like a hot little spot. It looks like somebody was here. Doesn't look like somebody was here. That's off of a ladder stand, a 2-man ladder stand. And there's no sign of a ladder back here at all right now. So this is probably pretty old. But it's right here on this is just a little dome of an island. It's probably maybe 30 yards circle, a little high spot in the middle of this tamarack swamp. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 oaks. 1 red, 6 whites. Somebody was here before, but right now, there ain't been anybody here for a long time. This is definitely going to get marked on the OnX, and you're not going to be able to, I'm obviously not going to show it because then you guys could find it. But this is definitely going to get marked on an OnX as a spot to come back and prep a tree. And the preparation process to pick out the tree, first off, you're on public land, so you have to do specific tree diameters so your stuff will fit on it. You know, because most sticks or strap-on steps, most strap-on anything, you know, hung out of a saddle, so the saddle will actually go on any diameter tree. But as far as the stuff, the apparatus to go up the tree, it's got to be a specific size typically. So that red oak is a possibility. That white oak in the center, it's pretty straight. These big tall trees here, these big whites here, that's a possibility. But what I'll do when I come back to prep this location is I will make a circle around this little tiny mound. This is actually kind of weird, but it's really, really cool. Make a circle around this mound, and while I'm making the circle around the mound, I will be looking at all these trees. And while I'm doing that, I'll be picking out the tree that has the best shot opportunities, because public land, you can't cut shooting lanes. You've got to do, everything's got to be natural. It's another huge negative of public land, because there's brush all around the perimeter of this. So as opposed to getting up in the trees and seeing what's your shooting lanes, you know, it's best to walk around the whole area, you know, out into the marsh, maybe 10 yards out into the marsh, because the deer will be skirting through the edge of the marsh, and look into the trees and pick out the tree by making that circle, which tree has the best natural shooting lanes without having to mess with anything. So that's going to be the process, and there's several options. You got one tree, 2 trees, 3 trees, 4 trees, 5 trees that are diameter wise okay for putting strap-on stuff on. So at least 4 trees, and like I said, any tree will fit with a saddle. And with the saddle, you can go around any of these trees and shoot any directions. So this is definitely a great, phenomenal spot. On a 1 to 10, this is a 10. And like I said, I have never stepped foot on this property before in my life. That's not to say there's going to be a 3.5-year-old buck or older on this property, but if there is, this is going to be a very high potential spot for a mature buck to come during daylight hours. You can see all the sign in the world. It's irrelevant if it's not made during daylight. So this is a spot where there's just total security cover all the way around the perimeter. A mature buck would have no problem coming in here and eating acorns in the daytime, whether on the morning back to bed or in the evening leaving the bed. And he could bed right tight to here. So This is going to not be an easy spot, because on an evening hunt, you know, you're going to probably spook deer coming in here. And on a morning hunt, there's a good likelihood you spook deer feeding at the acorns with your morning entry before daylight. So this is going to be a tough spot to hunt, but it's definitely a great spot, especially during the rut phases, because the does will be coming through here. So this will be a spot bucks would be scent checking for does, just coming through here. You know, if does were feeding here in the morning, pick up their scent if they're close to estrus, and you know, take up pursuit. So this is a great location, and this will be a spot that gets hunted this fall. Okay, coming through here. Notice this bed. We're probably 80 yards from that stand of oaks. Already crossed one spot that looked like it was a bed, but this here is definitely a bed. Come on in. It's got droppings off to the side. There's droppings over here. And if you look real close here, there's white hair here, there's a hair here. White hair is here. Hairs all over this place. Here's a hair, white hair, here's a belly hair, here's belly hair, here's belly hair. I don't know if you can see them on the camera, but those are belly hairs. So this is definitely where a buck is bedding, and I would seriously doubt it's a 1.5 years old. I would guess it's at least a 2-year-old. And bucks have been bedding in this spot for a lot of years, because, come on in here a little bit. If you look, this is pretty typical of a buck bed. If he's got brush around him, that's an old rub, that's an old rub, that's an old rub. That tree there is an old rub right there. This tree is an old rub, that tree is an old rub, that tree is an old rub. This tree on the other side is an old rub. Every tree, that's a really old rub. That's been there for years. So this is a spot bucks have been bedding for a lot of years. And a lot of times when an older buck takes a spot like this, other bucks know he beds here. They know this is his turf. And when he gets killed, another buck will take it over, just like bass. You know, I used to fish in a lot of bass tournaments and on small lakes, and you catch a bass, you take them into the weigh-in, throw them back in the lake, and 2 days later, they're back under the same dock or in the same spot you caught them a couple days earlier. And deer are the same way. When there's a really good spot, a bedding area, got a lot of security cover, he could hear anything coming in from here, because this is totally 100% marsh grass. Runways coming in here from every direction. And when he gets offed, there's a fresh rub actually from last year. You can see that one and another little one over there. Obviously they're small, 1.5 years or possible. I mean, I still would guess it at 2.5 because of where it's at. I think this is a little bit of a dominance bed, and I would think an older buck would be bedding here, not a little one. Of course, that could be made by a little buck that wasn't bedding here. But this here is definitely a bedding area, and it's not that far off that stand of oaks. So he could actually bed here, and he could actually hear deer from here going into that stand of oaks. Or he could be bedding here, and if there was a hunter that entered into that stand of oaks on an evening hunt, he would definitely hear that hunter, and he would be able to tell the difference between a hunter going into that stand of oaks and a deer. So obviously if he heard a hunter, he wouldn't go there. If he heard deer going in there, you know, then he's going to get up and go see what they are before dark. I'm literally 6 yards from that bed, and a buck this last fall definitely did this. Hit his antlers up in here, knocked this around. You could tell he hit this a little bit, busted a little branch over here, and it's right on this route, coming right in or out of here. Okay, this is another spot we showed on a video. We actually walked into it for the first time ever. Public land, new spot, never been there before. Saw a little dry mound on an aerial. Kind of went out to check it out, wore hip boots because I figured there was going to be water, and there was. I probably could have got in there with regular knee boots, but we've had a lot of rain. There's no way I could get in there now probably without waders, so who knows what it's going to be like in the fall. But it was wet. There was a lot of water we had to go through, but it's just a lot easier to get in there with hip boots, and you don't have to be careful, because a couple times I would assume with regular boots we'd have went over our boots. But anyway, it was a public land spot. It's going to be hot because it was oaks. There was all swamp for probably a half a mile, wet, marshy swamp. We found a few old beds with hair in them, been there for years, and had fresh rubs there from last fall and rubs from years before, so they were definitely buck beds. They were 40, 50 yards, 60 yards, I think one of them was, away from the actual island. And there was like a 30 maybe possibly 40-yard wide little dry mound out in the middle of this swamp. This swamp was probably, I would bet, a half a mile by a quarter mile. It's huge. Again, it's on public land, and there was this little dry mound about 35, 40 yards in diameter, just perfect little mound, just came up on a little bit of rise, and there was half a dozen, I think there was 5 oaks and one other kind of tree. I didn't really pay attention to what that was, but there was 5 oaks, a couple whites, a couple reds, which is actually kind of cool because most years they both don't have acorns at the same time. So, you know, with reds and whites there, you know, on the years the whites might not, the reds might, and vice versa. So there should be activity all the time there by bucks, and they'll be going in, even from old memory, you know, a buck that's 3 or 4 years old, just from memory, knowing does frequented that spot in previous years, they will bypass through there, checking it out, even during the years it doesn't have acorns, just from old breeding memory. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a video, not a video, but a whiteboard of what it looks like, because we showed it on video, walking into it, and I made some comments on it, but I don't think I whiteboarded it, so I'm going to whiteboard it right now. And again, I'm not an artist. All this green stuff is marsh. And again, we're talking cattails. There's some really tall weeds in there that are way over my head. Just a lot of marsh grass, a lot of water. There was water in here every place, but it wasn't all that deep when we looked at it. It would be right now because we've had a lot of rain. But anyway, it's all marsh. And then there was patches of brush all over, just scattered out throughout the thing. Every time there was a dry mound that was, you know, 3 or 4, 5 feet in diameter, there was a bush in it, some sort of a red brush bush. So anyway, we came in from the west. This would be north. So we came in from the west and came in, and we could actually see the tops of these trees over top of the other stuff. There was also some scattered hemlocks in here. In this marsh, there was scattered hemlocks. But anyway, we got to that little island, and it was just perfect. Somebody had been there in the past. There was a rail from, somebody had took a climber in there, because there was a shooting rail from, it looked to be a climber, could have been from a hang-on, but there was no sign of anything in there recently. But anyway, came in. There was runways all through this thing. There was runs all around. This is actually the circle of high ground, and then it was brushy all around the west side of it. This over here was all open up and just marsh grass for the most part. But I didn't prep it, but that's the tree I'm gonna hunt from. And I'll probably go out there with just some strap-on Cranford steps. I'm assuming I may use sticks because the Cranford straps probably may not be big enough around for that tree, and I gotta have pretty big straps because that's a big oak. But it's pretty much in the center, and from that, I'd say it's 15 to 18 yards to either side. I don't think this is more than 35 yards across, so it's no more than 18 to 20 yards to either side of this. And there's runs going all the way around the perimeter of it. There's runs going through it. There's from both east to west, west to east, north to south, northwest to south, southeast. I mean, it just northwest to southeast. There was just runs everywhere, and we found beds. It was kind of interesting because we found some beds kind of on the south side, and they were, you know, 40 to 60 yards off of the island. And typically in the fall, the wind's out of the north, or the northwest. So, you know, a big buck could bed on the south side of this little island, and he could actually scent check if he heard something coming in there. If the wind was right, he could scent check without even getting up and going and looking. He could smell it from where his bed is if a doe was hot. So I'm assuming they bed around this little mound according to which way the wind is blowing. Now, I don't pay any attention to the wind as far as hunting, but this is one thing about this spot is entries and exits are going to be really important in how you hunt it. This is going to be strictly a rut phase location, and it's going to be something I'm going to have to be in that tree an hour and a half before daylight, settled in and quiet, because mature bucks in this area on this public land gets pounded to death. They're going to come back into this marsh well before daylight. I'm not saying they're going to bed before daylight, but they're going to be back in this heavy security cover well before daylight, and they may meander through here or eat acorns here if they're dropping acorns. You know, at daylight, at the crack of daylight, they could be in there. But if I'm in there early enough, they can come in here half hour before daylight and be comfortable eating acorns and stay there till daylight because they feel safe, because they haven't heard anything come in. I'm already there. So this is going to be a great spot, and it really doesn't matter on this particular spot which way you enter from, because it's basically marsh every freaking place. But it does matter that you're in your tree way before daylight, and it's a spot where I won't exit that tree until a half hour after dark, because I don't want to enter, I don't want to spook anything with my entry, and I don't want to spook anything with my exit. So it's a spot I'm going to be in. It's going to be an all-day sit, way before daylight, half hour after dark. That way I will also give the deer time to get up and get out of this area, you know, after dark before I get down and make my exit noise. So this is going to be a great location. It's a spot I'll probably hunt no more than 2 times during the season. You know, this would be a really good, like November 1, you know, Halloween area, and then a November 5th or 7th, just before peak rut. It'd be a great spot for that. I'm looking forward to that. I think that's going to be a really good spot over the years. That's going to definitely produce something. Entries way before daylight. This is conducive for an all-day sit, because if you just hunted in the mornings, you'd spook something with your exit. If you just hunted in the evenings, you'd spook something with your entry. I think the mature bucks that are going to be bedding around this thing, they're definitely going to be within hearing distance, and they're going to be able to tell, you know, on an evening hunt, if you come in, that you're not another deer. You know, they're going to tell you're a human, and obviously they're not going to get up and go that direction. Same thing in the morning. If you come in here with a typical half hour before daylight entry, you're going to spook deer that are in this area already. Or if you do get in there and nothing comes through in the morning, and you get down at, you know, 11 or 12 o'clock to leave, you're going to spook stuff with your exit. So as tough as all-day sits are, this here is an all-day sit tree. And that's all I've got for you. And there's 2 other spots when we were scouting this particular public land, and I'm going to show whiteboards on those. They were considerably far away from here. One was about a half a mile from this spot, and the other one was about, the other one wasn't that far from the other spot. But the first one was half a mile to probably 5/8 of a mile from here, and then the other one was a couple hundred yards from that other spot. And I'm going to show both of them to you because they're good too.